welcome to 4 Random Books number 12. This will be going up at some point in November, hopefully. Maybe earlier. But as you've probably noticed by now, these are turning into a regular thing. And simply put, it's this. I like doing them. And so I have turned them into a regular, and today's one is Destroyers, Part 2. And this one is inspired by the newest book to arrive, which I'm going to get to last. But the reason I like these 4 random books is I get to go back and read books. And it's quite interesting to try and tell you about four books in 15 minutes. I fail quite more often than I succeed. But, I'm having a go. So, this one is The Tribals by Martin H. Brice. And until my book comes out, I would definitely say this is the best book available on the Tribal Class Destroyers. When my book comes out, I will, of course, change my tune on that one. But, when it comes out, hopefully should be out soon. March next year is what I'm hearing at time of recording this, which is August 2020. So I like this book because Martin H. Brice, when he publishes in 1957, really does take the class to heart. And I could read you the stuff about the books, about the ships. I could read you quotes of those, but I would actually like to read you the foreword, written by Admiral Sir Derek Holland Martin. Mr. Bruce has asked me to write this foreword, partly because we know each other at the Imperial War Museum, where he is on the staff, and I am a trustee, and partly because I was lucky enough to serve in 2 of the tribals. As the original first lieutenant of the Tartar, I dissuaded the Admiralty from imposing as our ship's badge a drop of tar on each side of a foul anchor. Instead, I suggested a baby saying goodbye, and we compromised with a more dignified Tartar chieftain's head, which I found in the British Museum. Tartar gave me my first taste of command and whetted my appetite for more, when for a few months my captain was sick in the early days of the war. The Nubian I commanded for over 2 years, mostly in the Mediterranean. Both ships were lucky and survived the war. In fact, the Nubian, as this book records, was the only one of the first 8 tribals to remain afloat after the autumn of 1942. A Sea Lord, when the design of the tribals came before the board, criticised the straight stem and penciled on the drawing the slight curve that he thought would improve it. This was accepted as he had drawn it. Thus, from the proud nostril curve of a prow's line, right after the stern, the tribals looked apart, powerful, beautiful, and effective. And so they proved, as the Australians and Canadians recognised when they built some splendid tribals of their own. This book is called The Biography of a Destroyer Class. The dictionary defines a biography as the life course of a living being. To a landlubber, the title may seem inappropriate for a book about ships, but a sailor, especially served in one of the tribals, and still more if he was privileged to command her, will realize how apt is the word biography. Although the tribals were ships of a class and outwardly looked alike, each developed, as is in a family, a personality of her own. They lived dangerously in a war that took a heavy toll on overworked destroyers and their crews, but, serious as were the casualties, the enemy suffered even greater loss at the hands of the tribals. Mr. Brice avoids heroics and writes factually. However, for those of us who served in the tribals, this book will hear the memories, the wet rough and tumble of the Atlantic gales, the freezing agony of Antarctic convoys in winter, and the more perilous summer days when the sun never set, the clear Mediterranean nights and the glassy seas, shattered by man-made war, the creaking and rattling roll in the Indian Ocean monsoon, the sweltering discomfort of the Pacific tropics, the weary monotony and sudden emergency, the thrill of high speed and night action, the long days of intermittent air attack, the companionship of a confident crew in a happy ship, the loss of life, limbs, and ships silhouetted against vain hopes and realized fears, courage and conquered cowardice, the taut tempers eased by the sailors' sense of humor and fun, the return to the haven where they would be, to boil a clean, or better still, give leave. These and much more. There was comedy and tragedy, triumph and disaster, boredom and crisis, good times and bads, but this biography of the great family of tribals justifies the pride and confidence so many officers and men felt for these illustrious ships. Our ships. Nothing more needs to be said, really. It's a great book. If you are interested in them, get it. Next one. Destroyer Actions, September 1939 to June 1940, by Harry Plevy. And basically, this is how the pre-war Royal Navy destroyer force gets blooded. And let's see. Let's go for the Altmark affair. There were a Cossack landed her rescued seamen the next evening in Leith, where they received a tumultuous welcome. Ken Robinson, at his action station on Cossack's ex-gun, remembers, there was not too much room to move about on the mess decks, but everyone was in high spirits, including the released prisoners, who did not seem much the worse for their experience. We headed back to Leith at a fair speed and landed the freed prisoners amidst a lot of cheering. I remember going to some sort of reception, which I think was at the town hall. There was food and drink and speech making, and the incident was in all the newspapers and on the radio. The British government made the most of the propaganda value. The treatment of the British seamen while held up the prisoner on the Altmark had been basic, and living conditions were unpleasant. But there had been none of the ill treatment which the government had anticipated. In Britain, the episode aroused a great surge of national pride, and Captain Vian and his crew were treated as heroes by the public and press. Captain Philip Vian went on to have an illustrious naval career, is noted out in this book. And the British government, conveniently forgetting its own Norwegian neutrality. This is a wonderful book. If you like reading in terms of sections of stories, of sections of what happened, i.e., this is this incident, then this incident, then this incident, this is a great book for you. Let's see if I can find the Battle for Central Norway. And by now, able seaman Gammon, who as my cabin hand was stationed on the bridge in action, had developed a flair for picking out, from a aircraft approaching, those which had air freed in their sights. He was nearly always right, and often reported the moment of a bomb release. This information was great assistance in making the decision that when, and in which way, to swing the ship to avoid the bombs. This dodging the bombs seemed to become standard, and indeed the only way for destroyers to counter German bombers during the Norwegian campaign. There were some modifications to the practice, as described by Commander S.H.K. Spurgeon, the captain of destroyer Echo. The Luftwaffe seemed to concentrate on the anti-aircraft cruisers, whose guns soon wore out through overuse. Destroyers then became attractive targets for bombers because the destroyer guns were limited in elevation, and by flying high they were immune from short-range weapons. We were, in other words, defenseless. Several times, day after day, we were bombed by these aircraft, and as daylight extended to little less than 24 hours in the latitude, the whole ship's company had little rest. As soon as the aircraft was seen approaching, our evasive action was to increase speed and alter course immediately following the release of the bomb. This could be seen easily enough with its wobble trajectory towards the targets. When exploded, a white column of spray would rise, leaving a black and dirty-looking soapy patch on the surface. Echo's yeoman of signals was a very efficient companion on the bridge. His name was Yeoman Paul, and he well knew that the effect this rather grueling experience has had on the morale of the ship's company, because there was always the chance that the next bomb might score a hit. One day, Paul suggested that, whilst the aircraft was making an approach, he would like to make a signal to its pilot on the very bright 10-inch lamp, of a rude four-letter word repeatedly. This would, he said, be a useful lesson of the ship's company to polish up their Morse, and, in addition, would give the pilot of the aircraft an opportunity of knowing exactly what we thought of him. Paul had a good vocabulary, and from then on, the silent suspense of the bomb drop was broken by laughter. He assured us later that the not uncommon complaint of bellyache amongst them had been cured. This, then, was Echo's unusual method of maintaining its high standard morale. Signaling the enemy is not an unusual thing. It's quite effective. Harry Plevy, Destroyer Actions, September 1939 to June 1940. And of course, that is a picture of the one, the only HMS Eskimo on the front. Now, a new book, In Action with Destroyers. Both these two are new books to me at this point. Probably not new by the time this comes out. In Action with Destroyers, 1939 to 1945, the Wartime Memoirs of Commander J.A.J. Dennis, D.C.C.R.N., edited by Anthony Cumming. It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. Let's see. Tripoli. Meanwhile, unknown to us, a war of telegrams had been going on between ABC and Churchill, who seemed to have little idea of how hard pressed we were, trying with a limited number of ships to keep Malta and Greece supplied, to support the army in the desert, all in the face of air attack against which there was little defence but a handful of fighters in Formidable, which could only be in one place at a time. When the carrier was not present, you could be sure that any aircraft sighted was hostile. In addition, the U-boats were becoming a menace, and the narrow waters were plentifully strewn with mines. Eventually, ABC agreed, with misgivings, to take the fleet to bombard Tripoli harbour, a rash venture to say the least. The operation was well planned. A convoy was run out of Malta. The Breckenshire, a fast supply ship supported by cruisers, ran fuel into Malta, while the fleet proceeded as if to cover these rather usual operations. The idea being to turn after dark to Tripoli, make a surprise bombardment, and be well off the coast by dawn. Destroyers were to minesweep ahead of the fleet when it reached the mineable waters. Formidable was to eliminate shadowing aircraft and provide fighter cover for their retirement. We sailed early in the morning of 18th of April 1941. All went remarkably well. I don't think the enemy ever spotted the fleet. Most of their aircraft may well have been fully occupied in Greece and the Western Desert. On the evening before the bombardment, we were detached, with mixed feelings, to screen Formidable, a less dangerous but also less interesting role than sweeping ahead of the battleships. So we missed the fireworks, which were spectacular, we heard, though I doubt if there was a great interference with Rommel's supplies. Next morning, the 21st, we all joined up and the fleet returned to Alexandria, sailing right into the enemy's home waters. We had expected trouble, but nothing happened. There are some wonderful, lovely pictures in here. This is a book to treasure if you like a personal account of World War II, a personal account of an officer with, I can't say unique experience because there were literally hundreds of destroyers, but definitely a uniquely, one of the few who've written about it in such candor and with such vibrancy. It is beautiful and is very interesting. Alec Dennis, age 90. Worth a read. The final new book, Destroyer Cossack, by John Roberts. Now, you know I love these books. I really do. And there might be another 4 random books which features this one and lots of the other ones I have. Because this is gorgeous. Because they are beautiful. Because they are lovely. Because they contain things like if I can find it quickly, the huge plans of ships. And you come out and you have a massive long plan of the ship. And they're just gorgeous. They really are. They're just beautiful to read and beautiful to. Ah, yes, there it is. And there's not just plans of Cossack in here, there's also plans of HMCS Haida and all sorts of other members of the class mentioned in here. It is an absolutely gorgeous book to read. It is a gorgeous book to have. It is beautifully well written. It has got lovely, lovely technical detail in here. And I'm trying really hard to not go over, because I can wax lyrical about this book for 10 straight minutes, and I'm trying very hard to make sure I keep the 15 minutes. Modifications 1936 to 1937. The evolution of the design did not end in November 1935. By the early 1936, it been decided to fit power hoists for the 4.7-inch ammunition supply, relocate number 4 mounting to the after end of the upper deck, and move number 3 mounting to the after end of the superstructure deck. The power hoists added a total of 22.8 tons, which, together with a 2.92 ton increase in design weight of each 4.7-inch mounting, raised the estimate standard displacement to 1,891 tons, with a possible loss in speed of 0.5 knots. It was proposed to simply wait for the actual condition of the ships to be established at the time of completion. Cossack was actually a close match to this design estimate, and It's fairly sensible because these ships do increase. As I've mentioned before, not a single one, 1,850 tons, not a single one. And the primary purpose of the relocation of the after 4.7-inch mountings was a reduction of blast effects from number 3 mounting on the operation of after pom-pom mountings. After steering position and 24-inch searchlight, it also allowed the mainmast to be moved 19 foot further aft, which improved wireless transmission range and reduced the congestion between number 3 mount and the torpedo tubes. Fighting the after 4.7-inch mounting on the quarterdeck was not a new idea, since it had been decided to do this in May 1935, but not implemented at the time due to concerns about the loss of efficiency in ammunition supply along the upper deck in poor weather. This problem was substantially reduced by arranging a hoist from the after magazine and shell rim to feed into a screened area at the after end of the superstructure immediately forward of number 4 mounting. The Royal Navy is thinking about its air defense, and the Tribal class, their design is a classic example of it. Now, we can all agree the 4.7-inch gun was not the best anti-air weapon ever made. In fact, frankly, quite a lot of weapons are better than it. But that doesn't mean the Royal Navy didn't have some logic going in behind it, and it doesn't mean that they weren't trying very hard to get their ships as capable versus aircraft as they could be. In 1939, it's hard to argue any other navy had done as much in preparing for the forthcoming potential of air warfare on sea warfare and its effects than the Royal Navy. Hope you enjoyed 4 Random Books number 12, and this is going to be 17 minutes long. Please remember, I have Patreon, I have Discord, Maritime History, and I have Twitter. If you want to chat, I look forward to it. Thank you and take care. Chatting.